Hi, I'm Milo Dennison.
And I'm Kev Bamboo, and this is Rip It Up Reviews.
Rip It Up Reviews covers cult movies, specially curated by your regular hosts of Rip It Up Again.
Yeah, and tonight's review, we're taking a look at the cult classic 1982 film The Thing, which has turned 40 this year, and it also stars Kurt Russell. So let's crack on, Milo, with the review. What's your kind of overall take on The Thing itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a brilliant film. I think it deserves its cult classic status. Kurt Russell's great in it. The special effects, I'm sure we'll get into those here at some point in time. I think they hold up well. And it's kind of nice that they did practical effects versus CGI or anything like that in 82. I mean, the CGI just would have looked awful. But yeah, good effects, good performances across the board. Have you seen the original The Thing, the old black and white one?
Yeah, the old one. Yeah, because
Yeah.
obviously it's not. Obviously, it's not that great. But I think and it's almost like there's a totally different story
Very
here,
different film, yeah.
comparative to that. I mean,
Mhm.
and then any kind of there's not really remakes been done, but I think there was it was supposed to be like a prequel, which was done in the early
Yeah, I
2000s, I
saw
think,
that. I haven't seen that
and
one.
it was meant to
Um,
tell the story before the helicopter arrived at the base at the American base.
oh, okay.
Um,
Oh,
so
on
that's
the
where
Norwegian
that's where
base or
that
whatever it was.
yeah, that's where that stitches into, and it's quite. The thing that's great about that is where they carry that on. It's that big at the end of that one. That's the beginning of the cult classic of The Thing that we actually know, the 1982 version. But
Mm.
yeah, for me, yeah, I mean, again, yeah, it's a cult classic. I've probably watched it more times than is healthy. Uh, but yeah, I just love that era, the things that they did. Like you say, we'll touch on the special effects for the time, all the stuff that they were doing. I think in terms of shooting the film, when it came out, I think it was quite slated. It wasn't like actually received that well. But I think because other bigger cult films that have become popular over that time came out as well. I think like E.T. came out a similar time of year, so
Yeah.
that kind of
Blade Runner
overtook
as
and
well came out that year.
Blade Runner. So it kind of put that into like third, fourth place in the pecking order. And I think obviously because it was horror as well, it was going to be more genre specific, a little bit
Yeah.
more niche. So the audience, I think, was probably a little bit too shocked at the time for the kind of detail that was in there for someone, because there's
Yeah.
some horrific and scary scenes, but it does what a horror movie is supposed to do, or suspense as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. This really works as a suspense. I mean, yes, it is a horror because it does have the alien doing its thing and a lot of the horror related scenes. But to me, it's really suspenseful because you're spending so much of the movie just trying to figure out who's been infected. And the guys fighting with each other, not trusting one another to figure that out as well. So it's a good suspense. And it does do really well with a lot of the horror tropes. I mean, they're isolated, they can't call for help, like all of that kind of stuff, but it's justified in this because they're on an Arctic station.
Yeah, I do love that as well. It is very kind of like literally there's nothing that they can do. This thing's here. They don't know what it is. They're not equipped really to do anything. Like
Yeah.
they've just got to they've got to think on the feet, and I think obviously that's where the lead, like obviously McCready kind of comes in and is very is quite a calm character amongst the bunch, and but is a leader as well at the same time. So there's lots of obviously stereotypes for the era and things like I think there's like political leans and stuff like that, but it's overall, if you treat it as just a pure suspense horror, totally does its job, because as you say, you really don't know who's going to be next, and you're kind of like you're thinking, is it going to be that guy? And there's loads of little like foreshadows and false foreshadows that
Yeah.
I say, is that guy next? And then you're like, no, it's not. And it's just like, it's a total whodunit as well, as well as you're living the journey with the characters as well, because they're all kind of, paranoid of each other. And it's a real, like, I find it's a real good psychological experiment as well, just within the movie, just to see how those characters respond and how you respond, and maybe who you're kind of like siding with, or wanting to kind of like survive, I suppose, at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of assume Kurt Russell's character is going to make it to the end since he's the main guy, but it's kind of the question of like, does anybody else make it with him? That kind of stuff. But it's good. So, favorite scene? What's your favorite scene?
Yeah, favorite scene. So I mean, this will probably stand out for a lot of people, but it's when they do, McCready's like, right, enough of all this rubbish. We're gonna do a blood test basically, and it's just where they take everyone's blood, and they're just waiting for and you've got that again. It's classic suspense because it's like in that line going down, you know, nothing, nothing, and you're like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, and then the next minute you just got this eruption. You got a great sequence of all the shots are focusing on the special effects moments there. And you've got that one, I think it's where, the guy's on the table and the head falls away because the thing's
Oh
obviously
yeah.
been revealed at that point. And it's just like the head's on the table and it kind of expands, stretches away. There's all this rubber and stuff going on. And then I think the head slides down this like medical table, and it's like a slug to me, it just slips all the way down this table, and then like this tongue or tentacle or whatever flies out and attaches itself to something. It just pulls itself away,
Yeah.
and then the next one it's up on its thing, and
Then its legs come
it's
out, and yeah.
it's a very like kind of also when you see obviously like in Alien when it like the smaller ones just like scuttle away, and you've got that in there where it scuttles away, and then obviously McCready kind of thinks screw this, goes to get the flamethrower, and it just becomes carnage. But yeah, it's one of the blood test especially is one of my favorite because it combines a bunch of suspense, the
Yeah.
action of the special effects, and so what about yourself?
Yeah, that blood scene works really well, especially because it's going to happen. You're waiting for it, right? Yet it still startles you when it happens,
I know.
and it's like, I know
Yeah,
something's going to happen here. It's going to startle me, and it does, and you're like, Jesus, it still works. Yeah, for me, you mentioned the head dropping off scene. Yeah, that scene with the chest, the defibrillator,
yeah,
right? And he's like zapping, and the whole chest opens up, and it's like
yeah,
his arms are off and stuff. Because that's another one where you're not necessarily expecting. You're expecting kind of something to happen, but not that, right?
yeah. That I
And
think you think maybe it's like, oh no, they're just gonna kind of like red herring us on that one.
mm-hmm. And it's going to turn out to be somebody else, and they're
Yeah,
like making it think, or who knows what's going on in that scene, right?
yeah,
But just then the whole chest opening up, and that's one of the reasons why I think this film works really well too, is because the iterations of the alien, right?
yeah,
It reacts, it does different things when it's in different people or animals and stuff like that. So you don't necessarily fully know what's going to happen versus like when you mentioned aliens, right? We know it's going to be a chest hugger, it's going to come out, and
yeah.
it's basically the same alien every time.
Yeah, its behaviors are gonna be pretty much similar in Alien, but yeah, in this, because it's morphing, taking on the character of either a human or an animal, it almost takes on some of the traits of the personalities, I suppose, because
Yeah.
I think there's a scene towards the end where you think obviously there's going to be several survivors, and then it appears, but it's obviously it's not, it's just morphed fully into a human at that point. So it's not in this kind of semi, morph state. It's actually gonna fully, like when we see with the dog, the dog near the beginning,
Yeah.
it's just acting a bit weird, but we don't know what's going on at that point. We haven't even seen the thing at that point. We've just seen an animal acting rather odd. And then similarly at the end, without obviously spoiling it too much for people who've seen it, but so what. Just
We're going to
like
assume
if,
anyone
if
has
they've
seen
not
it.
seen it in 40 years, then where have they been?
Yeah.
It's just like, but yeah, you've got this like near final, just before the final scene, I think, and it's really great actually. It's probably one of my favorites again. Still, is like where he puts his hand in the face, and
Oh
then
yeah. And
it takes
pulls
on
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's pulling the face, but it's just I think is it Doc? I think Doc just is the thing at that point, and he just starts, is like that, and then he kind of like just goes, he's like, he just looks around, he just goes, "Hmm," and then he's pulling the face, he's like pulling the face off. But obviously, it's the thing. It's
Yeah.
taken on some of those like stubborn characteristics of that character, that actor as well at the same time. So I really like how um it does move from that. But so we've just talking about favorite scene, and this might be quite difficult, but also what about least favorite scene?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I know a lot of people might say like the ending because they don't necessarily like the ending. I can understand that. I think for me maybe is the scene with the dogs in the kennel, because they're there's actually squirting stuff at the dogs at one point. So these dogs are in there actually kind of getting wrapped up in shit and that kind of stuff in real life in order to portray this scene believable. So I'm like, the poor dogs.
Yeah,
And anytime I watch something where animals are turned into something bad or abused in some way, and I don't, not necessarily saying they were like abused during the filming,
yeah,
but the fact that the dogs end up all dying and stuff, it's like, poor dogs.
yeah. It's kind of like they're a bit of an afterthought in the movie. It's like, oh, these are secondary to the core characters, and it's like, yeah, but they bring the thing to that base as well, don't they? So actually, it's a big part of why the thing is there in the first place, is
Yeah.
in some respects, because it's morphed into the dogs at this point. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the big question is like at the beginning, obviously the opening sequence. Well, obviously the helicopter's coming along, and it's obviously chasing down the dog. The Norwegians are there trying to shoot at it, and these obviously the American guys actually they do care. They're quite caring for the dog. They're like, no, let's just shoot down this nutcase helicopter. What are they doing, kind of thing. And some of the characters actually take the dog on as a temporary pet. They're looking after. They just think, oh, it's random
Yeah.
random husky.
Help the
Random
dog.
husky joined up, but little do they know it's an absolute monster. Is probably a biggest metaphor for the show. But me, yeah, I mean, you touched on it, and yeah, a lot of people will, and this is pretty generic, but for me, it is the ending, and I do feel it's like they were just struggling how to finish. But maybe they also wanted to leave it open, because they may be thinking like maybe like franchises or further down the line and doing the next one. So you can kind of see that in the end scene. It's leaving it open. We don't know necessarily whether the guys actually make it or not, because obviously they blow the whole place up, they warm it up. McCready touches on the fact that the thing wants to go somewhere cold and basically go into like, a dormant state until like a bunch of, another bunch of hosts basically turn up for it, as and when that might be. It could be millions of years, could be 2 years or something, whenever. But so I like that part of the end in explaining it. But I would have preferred a more kind of like, a cut and dry, like this is it. Maybe like with everyone kind of dying. But I suppose, yeah, you've got Kurt Russell as your main guy, and then obviously I think it's Charles as well, who kind
Yeah.
of is the only one that is there. And those two are the ones that just literally, they sat there drinking bourbon, I think, and then just thinking, seeing out the end of the world essentially from their point of view.
Yeah, it's yeah, that's my problem, especially with horror films, is because they always try to leave them with open endings so they can set it up
Yeah,
for a sequel, which is pretty annoying. And it's just kind of, look, in the movie. And in this case, I think too, like, they obviously didn't do a sequel. Who knows if they ever
yeah,
will, but the point is that they should have just ended it and made it a definitive ending.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
have the balls, if you know what I mean, to just be like, yeah, just end it. Just
Yeah.
like just be like, no one else is going to be able to do anything better than this anyway. So it's like, I think, yeah. But there may have been people involved in the movie or whatever that were like, no, you've got to leave it open because it could be like one, two, three,
Yeah,
etc.
and I think John Carpenter has actually said too that he likes the fact that it's got an open ending at it. Like, so
Yeah, it does leave. I suppose it leaves some interpretation as well.
yeah,
It's leaving that open, and then you can decide whether it's like, did they survive? Did a rescue team come in time for them to? So I mean, for me,
yeah,
the writing's pretty much on the wall. They're either going to get gobbled up by and turn into the thing themselves, or they're just going to die of once the fire
yeah,
burns out.
freeze to
They're
death
gonna
or
they're
who
gonna
knows what.
die. Yeah, but
Yeah. All right, best actor.
yeah, best actor, obviously, yeah, Kurt Russell, great performance from the guy, and I think this is the thing. It's quite difficult in horrors and suspense thrillers or whatever you want to call them, because often you don't really get standout actors in films, because they're just they're not meant to be like amazing movies. They're just meant to scare us a little bit or make us feel a bit weirded out. That's like the main role. There's not meant to be a particularly convincing actor that's good at something. But I think yeah, McCready. So Kurt Russell as McCready, obviously, kind of like it's a central figure still of the show. I think the cast on the whole really, really worked. What I was surprised is but it is accurate for the time, and not just because of the time of the filming. but there's no females in the actual role. But I think that's because they were accurate in the research of like Antarctic research stations, that they were male dominated, and especially in, you know, let's say the 70s, 80s, that era. But it would have been nice to maybe have had maybe like a female character in there. But then my other one I really like again is Charles. I think out of all of the characters in it, he's one of the ones who remains like the most composed, as Macready obviously does as well. But like there's some point all the others kind of lose it. You know, like Gary loses it understandably when he's like tied against the chair, and he's like, just let me the goddamn out of here, you know. And it's like, because the thing's absolutely going schizo.
Yeah, right next to him.
You've got what's face, I think it's like Windows and Fuchs are particularly not, you know, particularly stable characters anyway. You know, they're a little bit kind of unhinged from the rest of the guys. And then obviously the Doc is the Doc. You know, he's a little bit kind of, you know, offset. So yeah, Macready for me, he does, and then Charles, I think, could just for the composure whilst all the shit's hitting the fan, he still manages to maintain like some form of integrity. But
yeah, and he's a good character too, because he plays well opposite as like kind of the tough guy opposite of Kurt Russell's character.
yeah,
And there's scenes where he's like, look, you know, I'd throw you out in the thing and torch you as well. You know,
he's
he's
like, I'll
very
do
just
that to
straight up for it.
you.
He's like, if I think you're the thing, I'm gonna flamethrow you, kind of stuff. So for me though, yeah, obviously other than Kurt Russell's character, I decided to go Richard Mauser for this. So he plays the he's the dog handler guy. And
Yes. Yeah.
I watched an interview with him once,
He's the one who's got
and
the
he was
beard like me, isn't he?
yeah,
Like
he's the
literally
one
is
with
the
the beard,
son.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched an interview with him once, and he was talking about like working with the dog and how like, you know, just certain scenes of them like walking together or the dog, and they just had to work on these scenes for like ever and ever to get it done, and just his level of patience working with the dog and stuff. So I decided to go with him as a props to being patient and doing a good job of working with the dog.
Yeah, because I imagine his job, like you say, if he was the one, you know, doing those scenes mostly, backwards and forwards all the time, must have been kind of long days, you know, several retakes. You think you've got it right,
Exactly.
next minute direct's like, no, do it again, because the dog kind of lifted its paw at the wrong
That's
point or
exactly it.
something.
Dog turned its head this way.
Dog got distracted, or the human got distracted by the dog as well. You know, there could have been loads of factors in there, which is always difficult with animals. But yeah, so we've had best actor. So what about worst actor?
So that's a hard one, because
Yeah,
you said it. Everybody's really good in this. Um, I was thinking maybe Wilford Brimley's character, which I don't know why, because I like Wilford Brimley. Uh, but just the way, and it's not even that he's a bad actor in it. It's just his
yeah,
character's complete overreaction to the
yeah,
situation is probably why. But I mean, I guess they had to have somebody be that character that continues to force them to be stuck there.
yeah,
And so I know why his character is like that, but you know, I just view Wilford Brimley as this like big, friendly, mustached guy, and in this he's
yeah,
doesn't have a mustache, and he goes
yeah.
batshit.
It is not. He's not particularly friendly, really, is it? You know, in the sense
Yeah,
he's just like he's kind of loses it, but he's just very much for himself. But that's why I said it's a great you know, psychological experiment at the same time as how those people, I mean, they're in an environment, if you think about it, that would be like psychologically taxing anyway. You know, they're in a small knit group of people. If they don't get on or work together, then things will be difficult, or when you don't, things will be difficult. So to then be faced with this extra, you know, thing that's around, it suddenly, you know, separates who those who just become very selfish, those that want to kind of like try and save everybody. So yeah, for me, it is difficult, and for me, and it's really weird when I say this character, because I think Windows is a great character. She's pretty zany, you know, like the opening scene. He's there. It's like a holiday camp for that guy. You know,
yeah,
he's the one that's just not going to really do any work. There's not really a lot of work for him to do. You're kind of questioning why would they be there anyway if they're just not doing a lot. But you've always got that one, you know, lazy worker. But it's not because of the character. I mean, our character's a great character, but I think that his acting at times is a little bit hammy, which is expected. You know, it's again, it's a horror, it's a suspense, so it is a bit harsh. And I am clutching at straws because it is quite hard in that movie to pick someone that is, you know, there's no one that's terrible in there.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. We're forcing ourselves to pick
Yeah,
somebody, but the reality is there isn't anyone, you know.
yeah, they all give, you know, they all give good individual performances, and they all work quite well within the film. So yeah, when I hear about it being slated, I think when it first came out, obviously it's gone on to become this massive, you know, cult film that people talk about year upon year, and it's on TV all the time. You know, like
Yeah.
nearly most late evenings, you can probably catch, you know, the thing on at some point from like probably like anywhere from 9 p.m. till like 2 a.m. or whatever. It'll be on a channel somewhere in the world. Um, but yeah, Windows, but only for probably a slight little bit of hamminess. But that's probably down just to the character as well, being made to be like this
Yeah.
kind of,
It's like you have to be this way. Okay, I
yeah,
will.
this kind of douche shit. But it's a good character, and I do like the character. But got to choose somebody, and Windows takes the fall on that one for me. So
Yeah, poor guy. All right. Well, if you directed it or shot it differently, what would you do?
yeah, so I think again I've touched on this already a little bit with the ending. I just think, yeah, have the kind of balls to be like, right, we're gonna just end the film. We're gonna be blunt with the ending and just be like, right, that's it. Everyone's kind of destroyed. I mean, yeah, okay, you might not leave it open for interpretation, but considering that, and I know we're speaking in hindsight, and no one's made an actual sequel. We've talked about the kind of prequel that was made in the 2000s, but that was, you know, a prequel and not a sequel. So it didn't carry on the story. It was a before story. So I think, or if you was going to make a direct kind of, you know, like, you know, adaptation of it, yeah, I think I'd be going for let's kind of do a blunt ending. But that is probably with a little bit of hindsight of no one's really kind of carried on the story since. So yeah, that'd be mine. Few other things, probably. I mean, you can't really blame most of the camera work's great, like all the establishing shots and things is great, and like the location for the filming was great. So there's nothing really, like, you couldn't really say anything about the sets. I mean, like I say, you've got to remember the movie was filmed in '82, and you don't feel like it's been shot in '82. Like that could easily let's say CGI aside, in terms of what they would just go for the easy option today, the rest of it could easily have been shot kind of today, and you wouldn't, you know, other than maybe being on film. But you know, if I was a director shooting it today, I'd probably say let's shoot it on film for kind of like the authenticity and that gritty kind. You know, you want that horror kind of. I know you can do that in post and stuff, but I think it'd just be one of those, like, you know, those things that some directors have when they're like, no, we're shooting it on film still even today. It's like, don't care
Yeah.
if
There's a
it's
few that still do it.
it's like, don't care if it takes longer in post. I'm just like, I want on this. I want authenticity. So, but yeah, what about yourself?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. If they're not going to do a sequel, then end it. Um, it's hard to quarterback, you know, armchair quarterback a film, especially one that's a good
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the shots all work really well. Yeah, so I'm not gonna critique it too much. I'm with you. I would have liked to see a clear ending. Maybe if they had the budget for it, a little bit more of, like, you know, have them go inside the spaceship when they find it at the beginning.
Yes, yeah, I do.
That
Yeah, I
might have
do.
been cool to see.
And I think also, you know, um, when McCready and everybody gets the gang of them go to the actual, they go and try and source where this thing has been coming from, and you get that scene of the spaceships there, you know, big
Yeah, that
wide
nice.
angle shot.
Yep. Hmm.
It's in that, you know, there's the ridge, and then the abseil, you know, well, the viewer just feels it's that they've abseiled down it. Um, I mean, there may well be cuts and edits and things where stuff happened. You know, I'd have maybe done something that was a bit kind of like cliffhanger-ish, where you've got like maybe something happens whilst they're just abseiling down, and not even anything like horror or the thing related, just them having an incident while they're kind of abseiling down. But all you do is you get this shot of wide shot of them stood on the edge of this, big crater where the whole fucking, mothership's been. And then next scene it just cuts and then they're already there. Other than, I think you maybe get the initial part of one of them going down. But apparently as well, that wide angle shot was actually all a drawing as well. So when you see that, that's a
Oh,
painting or
nice. That's good work
an
then.
illustration. So it's a really nice illustration because you would
No,
just think they've taken a wide shot and then maybe done some like model or something and scaled it down.
that's what I would have thought, that it was
Um,
some kind of model that they were, yeah, doing
but yeah,
some
by all
first person
accounts,
shot or
that
something.
I don't know who the guy was that would have sketched it out, but yeah, that's just basically like a still frame there that's just inserted. But yeah, you never guess it, so it's good on the edit side. But talking of obviously special effects and things, and obviously the year of it, I want to have a little kind of discussion about that because obviously we know there's some great bits in there and all the stuff that they've done for the time. I mean, like I mentioned the one with I think it's Gary gets his face pulled by Doc, I think, and that's right towards the end. Great scene there, just putting the hands in, and that's really believable because obviously, as we know from people we've now spoke to and how some of those things are done, you look at it in a slightly different way, but you still watch that. I mean, I still watch that and go, you can't really pick out where the latex is on that guy's face because obviously it must have been like a rubber head or something, which
Yeah.
they obviously cut between being the actual real actor and then a rubber head when he did that. But yeah, there's a ton of moments. Obviously, a lot of these special effects moments, which is obviously done by the team of so Rob Bottin is like the guy who was kind of ordered to do this. And I think he basically spent most of that, like he didn't want anyone else kind of really involved in doing it as well. So there would have been obviously a team of people helping, but he pretty much nearly did all of the special effects almost like single-handedly. It was so that's incredible. But yeah, I mean, I want to hear a little bit about your thoughts on that. It is SFX heavy in terms of like these practical effects as well for the era.
Yeah, I totally appreciate practical effects, especially, I mean, this is early 80s.
Yeah,
So, how the technology and what they had available to them in order to do with a lot of these effects, they did a really fantastic job on the dog sequence, the pretty much all of them. I watching it now, that whole my favorite chess scene
yeah.
certainly still looks a bit too fake now. Uh,
Yeah, it's a
but
little bit for me. It reminds me of, but without the stop motion. It reminds me of Jason and the Argonauts.
yeah, a little bit
It's
exactly.
very like the modeling there is a little bit when it opens up because it's a very like this jagged edge.
Yeah,
You can tell it's
exactly.
something
Like
that's just been made to like
with a quick cut as he's
yeah,
doing it and stuff, and then the arms and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I guess they probably could have, but same thing. Like within the budget that they had, I know compared to most of his films, it actually had a good budget, but it still didn't have a massive budget. I mean, it was
yeah,
still a horror film, and the effects are just brilliant. And I would much rather see practical effects that don't look perfect than CGI effects that look good at the time, but then don't
yeah,
hold up, you know?
yeah. Because time would just destroy them totally. Whereas at least these totally kind of they hold the era, but
Yeah,
there's just enough belief and mystery around them. You've got to remember, obviously, it's a sci-fi film as well, so you can have those allowances for some inaccuracies, if you know what I mean. You can kind of play
exactly.
around with ideas a little bit, and I think what it ultimately does with a lot of these films from those kind of eras, and obviously the thing is quite a standout for it, but it really does show like the creativity of those artists and those special effects people because you can't get that today. Like you can if someone decides to make a movie and they say, right, we're going to use puppets, we're going to use practical effects, which they still do use blends of. Like I think in say like show like The Walking Dead, I think
Yeah,
Greg
sometimes they
Nicotero
do.
decided that
Animated.
they were going to still use mostly classic effects. Obviously, where practical, they use CGI. But I think that's probably the right way to go is use like a good blend today where you can still like have the skills of look what this guy can do if they push a bit of rubber this way or paint something in a certain way, mold something in a certain way. then maybe touch it up a little bit in post with the CGI and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Nice
know,
point.
so that it's not overly, you know, whereas if it's like anything, you know, you're a photographer, you're a photographer as well. Like, you know, you see images that have been over processed, and you just kind of look at them and you're just like, it's just been too much
Yep.
done to that. And I've
Put the
done it
nose in
myself.
just
Like
that tiny little bit.
I've done it just to try it out. And I think because I'm a really harsh critic of, and it's in a lot of phones now and in a lot of like the newer digital cameras. You've got like the HDR kind of 10 plus or
Yeah.
whatever. And I don't like it because it's automatically choosing a saturation, and it's kind of going, this is how your image should look, and this is what it should be perceived to be. But it's just overly saturated, and the image just doesn't look right. And yeah, there's specific things that you could probably shoot where you would get that right. But like if you're doing a portrait of a person, for example, there's absolutely no need for like that much rendering going on, and like kind of over popping an image just ends up making it look fake. So yeah, with regards to the film, I mean, it's the same for me. I mean, I would rather have mostly practical effects. Maybe we're older and there'll be some kids going, yeah, but you wouldn't be that stupid about it. You wouldn't go like over the top. But if you still went like, you think, yeah, okay, in 20 years, what's CGI going to be in 20 years?
Yeah.
And will stuff used now, if you did a film almost entirely with CGI, are you
Well,
going to
and they
look at it and
do
it'll be
nowadays.
dated? Yeah, and
So this is the
it'll be
thing, is like so many
dated.
of these films are filmed all CG, in front of green screens and
Yeah.
monitors and stuff. And like as
Well,
an actor, at
Marvel,
least these guys are
for
actually getting
yeah.
to interact with something,
Yeah,
like
they're actually, yeah, the scenes are, yeah, they are very hands-on scenes because they're
yeah.
actually doing this stuff. And
Mhm.
that must be difficult actually for the modern actor as well. I know that touches on things a little bit differently, but that must be difficult for a modern actor. Like if they say, you know, this is without us being like anti-Marvel, even though, you know, Marvel can kind of it's just, you know, Marvel universe. And lots of people love Marvel films and stuff, but yeah, there's not a lot of acting going because these guys are doing everything in front of the green
Yeah.
screen. But that must also mean that the way they act obviously just adapts because they're having to do something totally different. Like they're not even interacting with maybe another person. Like
No,
there won't
often
even
it's
be another person stood there. Like
yeah.
it's like, oh, you've got to imagine that there's this giant F off monster
Yeah.
or whatever, or something that come. I don't know. Imagine someone's charging at you with a big bushido or something, and they're about to like try and cleave your head off. But you've got to imagine that's happening, and then you've got to react to it and time it as if it's. So it must be really frustrating, I imagine, as an actor, because you've probably got to do like, you know, a zillion takes or whatever just for that to kind of be believable, or so that the teams can then just stitch bits of that together
Yeah.
and make all
Which
of
I think
it.
is why so many movies have so many quick cuts. You can't actually
Yeah,
focus on the lack of performance anymore.
yeah, it's literally like, oh, bang, 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 bang. It's like camera, 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 camera. You know, if that was being directed like live at the time with actual actors
Yeah.
in that mode, like a director would just be like going, camera on, camera two, camera three, camera one, camera two, back to camera, you know, wide. You know, it'd be erratic. But obviously all that's being done in post. But yeah, I would much prefer the special effects to be, you know, still holding like some practical and keep those, you know, keep those skills going, because I think they are still needed in film, you know, like because you can still make, you know, there are some absolutely incredible artists, and there still are, you know, today knocking around. There's some incredible people doing amazing work, and you look at the stuff and you're like, yeah, that money should be there, that should be appreciated. And I think it is, but it is all too easy for films and production companies to go, yeah, we're just gonna go straight in and just do all this posting, stick it all in CGI, and
Yeah.
you know, just green screen,
Yeah. Don't worry about it. We'll do it in post.
green screen.
Yeah.
But
All right. Well, characters then. If you were a character in the thing, what would it
who
be?
who would I be? So yeah, I think I'd actually love to play the thing. Like if you could be, you know, a bit like, you know, when we touched on, I think it was in Rod's episode about the guy that was, you know, got to play the actual alien. Well, I think there was two guys that played it.
Oh, in the
Um,
alien. Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, I'd love to play the thing. Obviously, I could morph into stuff, But it'd be good to kind of, if you know, if you had to wear different costumes and stuff, so you're like half, you know, you've like half dog. I think a lot of that would be quite fun because you're just, you know, it's a quite an erratic creature with, obviously it's got a purpose just to become a full host of whatever it's going to imitate. To play that as a role, I think would be pretty fun. Obviously you've got no dialogue, but just bouncing around all over the place, you know, maybe wearing some very interesting outfits, getting fitted up every day, the makeup and stuff that you'd probably be on. I think that'd be, yeah, for me, from a pure performing rather than acting point of view, I think actually playing the thing itself, yeah, I'd want to play the creature. But yeah, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, McCready is the hero, so
Yeah,
there's the hero aspect. So if I weren't choosing him, I'd go with your favorite guy, Keith David as Childs, because he's
yeah,
such a badass, and he's just so
yeah.
blunt about his badassness. So he's just cool. He's just like, yeah, fuck it, yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like, yeah, yeah, I don't know, I do like, it's easy to go for obviously McCready and just be like, yeah, I think
yeah,
we'd
exactly.
all
He's
have
the
that as
hero. Of
like
course, I
a,
want to play him,
yeah, it'd
but
be the obvious first choice in some respects. But yeah, Charles, if I was playing a human in it, I think, yeah, I'd be going for Charles myself as well.
exactly
But I
because
think it would
he's
be
just
pretty
fucking cool.
cool to play the actual thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just
That's a good
if
answer.
someone did it, I think if they did like, you know, if they did like if someone did like a live action like adaptation and it was like a theatre production or something, I think it'd be really cool to play something like the thing. Like you imagine like you've got Warhorse, you know, where you've got like a bloke
Yeah,
that's in
and they
this.
could do this, yeah,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
all
I think
one
that would be cool.
location, and yeah, it'd be interesting to do. You heard it here, folks. So if you're a stage producer,
Yeah,
do the thing.
Milo and Kev are going to write
Featuring Milo and
a
Kev.
a stage production of the thing
Exactly.
and then stick it out there, see if anyone wants to pick it up.
Exactly.
But so yeah, so then we'll come down to, again, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but yeah, we're going to go on to like the cinematography and the overall shot choices. So yeah, for you yourself, what would you kind of like takes be on that, the all the photography and things like that? If you
Yeah, I
remember
think
it.
they did great, man. I mean, the winter scenes, you get the feel of the cold, especially when they have them coming in from outside and they're just covered in ice and freezing, and so it's believable that they're in a cold environment, which I really like. I like wider shots, and
Yeah,
some of the aerial shots are great. My biggest pet peeve. Well, I don't know. I have a lot of pet peeves with modern filmmaking, but like one of which is like almost every shot is an extreme close up of the person's face, and it's
yeah,
all handheld camera movement and quick cuts. So the fact that there's actually wider shots in this, like, and which is got to be hard to do in this because they're in tight spaces, right? So they've
yeah,
got to have those
yeah,
cameras
exactly.
back far enough to be able to get those wider shots. And nowadays they'd just be lazy about it and be like, yeah, we'll just do a close up of the face. That's how we do everything nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, because
So
I think another horror that you kind of would come to, and I don't particularly hate the film, but it is very much like that, like you said, with the handheld elements and these super, super close ups almost. And I think it's Cloverfield, I think, where it's one of those, not like the Godzilla kind of mashup
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing. And I mean, it was meant to be filmed like as if it was low budget in the sense that, these guys are having a party and they're just running around with their cameras, and it's like it's the footage discovered. That's the idea of it. But yeah, far too many kind of like close-ups, and that happens a lot. But yeah, myself, I do like, I like a lot of those wider shots. Again, I'm going to touch on the same thing that you said about, must have been really difficult to get some of those other like closer shots as well when they're in such a smaller environment there. I mean, it must have been, for sets and stuff, there must have been lots of cuts in walls and stuff where cameras were kind of sat in just to get a bit more angle on, like especially, like down the corridors and stuff, because a lot of
yeah,
scenes obviously are
exactly.
spent down that corridor of the complex. I really love the when Doc's been kind of like banished to the cabin. Um, I kind of like love those scenes because there's very little to go on there, and the actor kind of like delivers that environment very well. I mean, I'm sure it was much more open than it appears, but we've just got this. It looks like he's cooped up and banished
Yeah,
in there. He's
exactly.
sat in there, and obviously you've got like, there's McCready returns and there's the noose there, and it's just like the way that's just framed all in that one small shot. I think they do really well to get a lot of detail into all of the shots, even the closer ones. But of course, wide ones. I mean, I think it was shot.
And they were
Location
doing all of
was
this on film, so the cameras were
yeah,
much bigger too. So they've got to make space for these
yeah.
cameras as well.
That's exactly. You know, you got huge, you know, headstocks on the
Yeah.
cameras where the film's coming in, and like, yeah. But also, yeah, I think it was filmed. Obviously, it's meant to be Antarctica, but I think they were kind of just on the edge of like the Arctic Circle. I think it was in British Columbia, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, somewhere
Is
in
where
Canada.
most of it was filmed, and possibly some in Alaska as well. So, but
Yeah, and
right
then
up
a
on those
soundstage,
northern,
I think, for a lot of the interiors.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think a lot of the stuff like those special effects heavy moments,
Yeah.
a lot of that was kind of like Rob. But in like I say, I think a lot of the stuff that he did was all done back at an LA base, and yeah, taken. You know, then obviously some of the acting, like I say, went to a sound stage as well. But yeah, no, I did. I think the what is great, and again, I did touch on it before, but I think it's just the fact that a lot of those establishing shots and like the helicopter scene, you know, like on the like the opening scene when the dog's running along. I mean, they're great, but yeah, you could do those today, and or you could like those shots. They're almost timeless. I think that's what I'm trying to say is that you could put them in a movie today, those exact same shots, and you wouldn't be going, "Oh, that was shot in such and such," unless you're a really, really like a technical nerd who like just knew. You could tell by looking at it what type of film was being used or whatever. But just as a pure viewer, I think like yeah, that the stuff that they shot, you could just reuse again today, and it would you'd be quite happy with the footage
Yep.
that's there. So yeah, I mean that's for me.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. And final
Yeah,
thoughts on the
man.
thing, including your rating.
Yeah. Well, I think like yourself, I mean, like many people around, it's one of my favourite cult horrors. I say the opening statement was that I've watched it probably far too many times. It's more than healthy. Um, I always watch it when I get together with people. I love pretty much all of the special effects in there. Rating wise, yeah, yeah, it's a great suspense horror. And yeah, obviously, John Carpenter is the dude, for a lot of people when it comes to, and I think I might be wrong here, but I think the score also was Ennio Morricone as well.
Yep. Yeah, it was.
Um, yeah, so because I was going to say John Williams, and I was like, no,
Yeah, I
because I
think you're
don't
right.
think Carpenter used
No, because yeah,
Williams
Carpenter
much.
did not do the score for this like he normally does.
Yeah, that's
And
it exactly as well. And so yeah, Ennio Morricone, obviously, who's done great tunes like, for all like the Western stuff like Fury of
mhm.
Fire and things like that. But in this, I mean, it's pretty, it's there's not a lot in the soundtrack as well, but it's just that simple, that boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, and that's almost like that's a running theme, very much like in, I think it's like Day of the
Oh,
Dead, I
yeah.
think, where
Any
you've
of
just
his
got
films. Yeah.
doom, doom, it's so simple but
Mhm.
it's massively effective. So yeah, for me, rating wise, yeah, they capture the mood. It's eerie. You never know you don't like you've already said, you don't know who's going to succumb next to the thing. You don't know you really just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's what makes it such a great film and why so many people love it today. So as it's one of my favorites, out of 10, I'm going to go for an 8.5 out of 10, I reckon. I think
Yeah, that's a good rating.
yeah, I'm about there with that. There's things that are better, like the ending obviously could be better, and that's my only real criticism. But yeah, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm on the same boat, man. I think it's a great suspense, great performances, great directing, great across the board. So I'm going to go just a hair higher and go for a 9 out of 10 on it.
Oh,
I'm going to give it a 9.
nice.
Mhm.
I'm liking that. Yeah, cool. Well, I think to be honest, that's us pretty much done for that. Our first Rip It Up reviews. We probably will be doing another one at some point. But so when we do another one, Milo, what is the movie that we are going to review? Because I think it's your turn.
So we all know the film Super Troopers by
Yeah.
the guys at Broken Lizard, a cult classic. Everyone probably agrees with that. But how about the other Broken Lizard film, Club Dread?
Club
Cult classic?
Dread.
Possibly
Wow.
or possibly not. So, Club Dread by the guys at Broken Lizard.
So Club Dread, we'll find out next time what we think of Club Dread. Um, but yeah, And also, just as a little nod to obviously our regular thing that we do, which is obviously Rip It Up Again, which usually interviews, guests, musicians, film, and mostly film artists, I suppose. We've also got, talking of film artists, we've got coming up on future episodes of Rip It Up Again, we've got Jim Crutz, who played the helicopter zombie in the original Dawn of the Dead. Then we've got Rob Berman, who is a special effects artist, who worked on some parts of The Goonies, Tremors, and loads just really, really interesting stuff. And then we've also got a musician, a punk musician turned director, and that is Joe Cardamone. So yeah, stay tuned for
Should
some
be
of that
fun
coming
stuff.
up. Absolutely, yeah.